think is probably one of the coolest guys that I know. And there's a lot of people that, that I really respect in the program. There's a lot of people that I really look up to. But there's some people that I'm quite sure that I'll never be as cool as they are. And I'm okay with that. And Matt's one of those guys. And I had the privilege of getting to hang out with him when he came to Nashville. We met a few years ago, and I've always loved his talks and Jay's talks and Bill's stuff. And I really appreciate you coming again tonight. And I don't take any more of your time. You know what to do. Just have fun. Talk for as long as you feel like, 30 minutes to an hour. And we'll kick it off. Here you go, Matthew. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sam. Good to see you again. Good to see everybody. Some of my old friends on here and new friends. I do apologize in advance. There are some old timers in here talking about coats and ties on Zoom meetings. I live in Southern California where a lot of that stuff is highly enforced. But I will say this, I shaved 10 minutes before I got on this call because I've been doing WebExes for work since 7 o'clock this morning. And I wanted to look at myself and not be repulsed. I don't know about you guys, but I work now in this environment. I've watched my nose grow, my hair recede, and I've watched myself age in 4 or 5 months. It's disturbing, but it's really great to fight vanity. I love this reading. There's more in this reading, Sam, that you read than you sent to me, and I listened very carefully. I tried not to think too much about what I wanted to share. I wanted it to hit me and to be spontaneous, but it's so interesting when you read this and think about Bill and his depression, and he's reaching out compassionately to somebody else with depression. What I thought about when I read this earlier today, Sam, is that I thought about a number of things that have happened. And I think the most important thing to start with, if I'm going to talk about this, is that, when I got here 27 years ago, I was 31 years old. I was, bankrupted spiritually, emotionally, man, like all of us, and financially. And I was, just a mess, right? I was a single man. A baby was born to me on the day I got sober, to someone I did not marry. We did not marry. We have raised that child together, both completely unprepared to be parents. Thank God for the grace of sobriety. Thank God for Phoebe Rose, my daughter. She's 27 years old. We celebrate our birthdays every year. She's a nurse now in Portland. Thank God for all of that. But that was my life when I got sober. I was the youngest of 4 in a family. I was a professional musician who got kicked out of a really good band in North Carolina, by the way, and many other good bands, and nowhere to go. And now I'm 27 years sober. I've raised 4 children to adulthood. I've been married for 24 years. I've had a couple of careers, but the career I'm in now has been going on for over 20 years. And AA saves my life. When I used to go to meetings and hear this all the time, AA saved my life. And if you've ever heard me speak before, I often open with, if you picked up anything in my house and turned it upside down, including my children, on the bottom it says property of Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's AA gave me a life, but AA continually saves my life. And when I read this and hear this, when Sam read it, and I think about Bill and the compassion of writing this pretty serious letter to somebody, there's so much that pops to mind. And I wrote a note right when you started, Sam, reading this about, there's a line from Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist silent monk, wrote some great books in the 40s and 50s about spirituality. And in the first line of his book, No Man is an Island, is, a happiness that is sought for oneself alone can never be found, because the happiness that is diminished by being shared with others would never be large enough to make somebody truly happy. And I think that's AA in a nutshell. Like, all the lessons I've learned in AA fit into that. I have searched for pleasure thinking it was joy. I continue to do that well into sobriety, just like Bill says he did here. I need the pleasure of prestige, the pleasure of romantic love, the pleasure of money, the pleasure of, whatever. And pleasure is so stale very quickly. It's like fast food. It tastes great at the time, and then you're like, why did I do that again, man? And then when it's uninvited, it's so beautiful and fulfilling. But joy, like searching for happiness for everyone around me, with me, or happiness that contributes rather than steals or detracts. That's what I've learned in AA. And that's why, AA saves my life. I just got back Tuesday night from a camping trip. I took 4 days off on either end of the weekend, 2 days on each end. Couldn't afford to do it from work. Work is very intense right now, but I needed to go retrieve my Airstream trailer from Seattle and bring it to California. I moved back to California, and my 22-year-old son, he's kind of troubled right now, was my companion. And the way I stayed quiet while he discussed how he was a victim of everything and the world is terrible and how dare I leave him with this world to grow up in, and the way I loved him compassionately, the way I slept at night was because of the things I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had compassion for him. I used to blame everybody, and I didn't not represent the morals and the character and the values that my wife and I have demonstrated to him through all of these years. But I was able to not be a dictator, not be a person who didn't listen. I was able to be someone who wanted to be with him in spite of how challenging he could be. And we had some really good times. I will tell you this, I wasn't going to talk about this, but we're coming down with the trailer. It's a 5,000-pound, 45-year-old Airstream trailer. So if you don't think it's a little tense pulling this behind an old F-150, I can tell you I'm still hungover. I'm still turning corners, looking behind me and putting my brakes on slowly. And I haven't had the trailer attached for a while. But he fell asleep on day 2. We were somewhere in Oregon. We got off for lunch. He and his beautiful husky fell asleep in the back seat. And this GPS just took me out into the woods, like this weird way. And I looked again and it said this was the shorter route. It wasn't back to the highway. So I just went with it. And while he was sleeping, I suddenly am driving through like these lakes and these rivers of Oregon, big, open, spacious meadows with farms and barns and beautiful old Victorian houses every few miles, beautiful mountains between me and the coast, hawks and eagles. And while I'm doing that, I started saying a mantra that I picked up a while ago that just kept me kind of quiet in my head so I could be with everything. And while I was with everything, I thought of a line that a spiritual teacher said to me once. He said, every single word and every single spiritual book was written for you. If you keep thinking it was written in a different time or for a different place or these set of beliefs, you're missing the point. It is the true, magnificent, whole Atma, the self, the creation of all beings. It's trying to speak through spiritual literature. It's not interested in being dissected. It's not interested in being categorized. It's trying to tell you something particularly right to your heart. And when I approach things like that, like this reading and the big book and a lot of spiritual books I read, I'm a very strange guy that way. I have a degree in religious studies. Almost everything in my bookshelf has something to do with God. But when I treat things like that, I feel this peace. So while I thought that thought while I was driving through these meadows and these lakes and these mountains and these eagles and these deer, it's incredible. Like the sense of peace that washed over me. And in my head, I heard out loud, it's all for you. This thing that's happening right now, this moment you're in, driving through these lakes and these rivers and these mountains, it's for you. Don't miss it. It's happening right now for you. And I really go, okay, all right, it's all for me. And then my head would drift into worrying about my son. And I'd come around a corner, there'd be this rushing river. And in my head, I'm like, this is for me. God did this river. You don't think God can handle Rory? It's like, you know how long it take to make this river? And it was just like funny, like, oh yeah, Rory's fine. And then I'd start heading up into the mountains, and there's magnificent trees, just miles high, just beautiful. And I'm getting closer to the shore, and I start worrying about my wife or our retirement. And he's like, hey man, check it out. I did the hawk. You think I can't handle retirement? You know, and I didn't plan on talking about this, but this is how AA saves my life. It didn't save my life 27 years ago. I have a spiritual life. In spite of all the years I studied religion, I didn't seem to have a spiritual life because of what Bill talks about here. Now, I want to get a little bit more into what he says, because he's looking at this prayer and he's saying, you know, here's the answer, you know, help others, you know, the prayer of St. Francis, why isn't it working, right? And then he talks about dependence. I'm dependent on whatever. And what I wrote down when you read it, Sam, was the other part of being of service to other people is having a quiet inner life to be able to bring other people something of value. You know, Ram Dass years ago in one of his books said, the only thing you have to offer another person is where you're coming out from your center. So God help all those people I tried to help my first year of sobriety. I was like a Tasmanian devil inside. But because AA's 12 steps they never stop. They never stop. You know, beware of the man who says, I worked the 12 steps in the past tense. You know, they don't read the same book I read. This is an ongoing thing that happens. And what I found is, after many years, 10 or 15 years of having a sponsor, Bill C., who spoke for you guys just the other day, tell me over and over again, it's all about the 12 step. It's all about helping other people. It's all about doing that. I felt empty at 15 years of sobriety. And I was like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. I'm going to jails and prisons. I'm sponsoring all these guys. I'm driving people to meetings, and I just feel empty because I'm not 32. I'm not 31 with a few months of sobriety, dazzled by the fact that I have a driver's license and insurance for the first time in 10 years. I'm in the middle of raising children. I got a wife that had a massive stroke. I've been my wife's caregiver for 20 years of a 24-year marriage. And I adore her, but man, it takes its toll. There's this feeling that I'm just here to help everybody, and I'm dying inside. And I was at a meeting, and my sponsor's wife, or my grand sponsor's wife, Jay, who you've had speak here, his wife Adele, said, how much are you meditating? And I said, honestly, I got this new job. I'm traveling a lot. Not at all. And she said, okay, I want you to double that, which was so beautiful and compassionate. She wasn't wagging her AA finger at me. She was excited about the gift she was getting from the 11th step. And then her husband, Jay, who you had speak here, Bill's sponsor, walked up to me 2 minutes later, like good cop, bad cop, and said, hey man, what can I do to help you? And I said, well, Adele just pointed out, I'm not meditating. And he said, I'll call you in the morning. And he called me in the morning every day at 6 o'clock in the morning. And we meditated for 5 minutes for a while. And then after a few months, 10 minutes. And after a few months, 20 minutes. Now there's people on this Zoom call that are on that call 15 years later. There's 25 to 30 of us that meditate every morning from 6 to 6:20. And I didn't feel empty anymore. So from my point of view, you have to nurture the still, quiet voice inside you if you want to help anybody at all. Because I can go to the jails and the prisons, and I can quote the big book, and I can talk about AA this deep. There's plenty there. There's good fruit right there hanging down at the bottom. But if I want to grow spiritually when I'm in a jail or a prison, I better bring what I got, man. Not what you told me 15, 20 years ago, what I got today. And I remember a conversation I had, Sam, when you were reading this, and I was thinking about that meditation and just finding that there is a place in me that's quiet and still. It's been there all along. I just haven't visited it very often for a long time. And now I do, right? It grows. It becomes more reliable. I can go to it. I did that a lot when Maury was telling me, how awful the world was. I just went to my quiet place because I wanted to offer him something, not my dad yelling at me that I'm a communist. I wanted to be somebody who was right there with him. But I remember when I was playing with the band and I wasn't doing very well, I was really self-destructing. And there was a singer that didn't stay with us very long, but he's a really good singer. And we were loaded one night and he said, "Man, I think there's something going on with you." He said, "I'm worried about you." And I said, "You know what? The still quiet voice inside me is telling me I'm really screwing up." And he said, "Do you know how lucky you are that you still hear that voice?" And that was years before I got sober. And what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, working with other people, is that these steps can reacquaint you with that voice. The hardest thing to hear is that still quiet voice if you think you're in charge of your life. It's even harder to hear if you think you're in charge of your life and you've run your life into the ground. It becomes slightly more audible when you let go of the reins and realize there is actually a power greater than myself. And I don't want to get off on that tangent because I will go speak, like Sam says, before way too long. It's obvious there's a power greater than yourself. I can't walk out across the room that I'm in without the trees that are outside breathing out what I'm breathing in. I did not kill my food and strip it and clean it. Everything I touch has 1,000 people attached to it. Everything I touch, everything within me, the person who made it, the person who developed it, the person who shipped it across the country. Thich Nhat Hanh says it more beautifully than anybody I've ever seen. He said, "I've got a paper in front of me. I'm reading from a paper. And I see a piece of paper, but the poet sees rain. The poet sees earth and a tree. And then I can see there's earth and a tree, and there's a woodsman, a lumberjack, and a truck, and a paper mill, and a paper mill owner's mother, and a store, and a night clerk who happened to be there when I went in and needed paper." Everything we touch is attached to everything else. Of myself, I am nothing. That I would ever think that there wasn't a power greater than me is absolute arrogance. And what's the cure to arrogance? Bill says it right here. He says, what we needed was real maturity and balance, which is to say humility. And this book, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, says over and over again, willingness, humility, willingness, humility. That's what you're going to need. And that's how AA continues to save my life, is I have to get that. And believe me, my experience is life is a series of events that continuously ask me to grow. I had to grow this weekend with my son. We had a very good conversation today. He went home knowing where I stand, what I'm willing to do for him, what he needs to do for himself. I don't want to have those conversations. I want to play guitar with him and laugh. I want to go to the beach, but I'm invited to grow. I'm continually invited to grow. So my experience is if you live these principles, humility will be provided to you by the circumstances that you're in. You'll either realize, hey man, I can fight this, or I can participate in it. That's the difference for me. So when Bill says that he had always been dependent, the still quiet voice inside me, the one that thank God I can still hear, and I've nurtured by listening to you, by reading this, by working the steps with people. I think everybody knows who's done any of the 12-step work with another human being that it teaches you so much about yourself and your own prejudices. Sometimes a sponsee will say something that I've been feeling for years and I couldn't articulate. And when I hear that, that voice gets a little more audible inside of me, and I can carry that to the next person. We're all connected. This isn't just a piece of paper. Everything flows. So what happens to me in Alcoholics Anonymous, by nurturing that still small voice and then going and being of service, I start to actually naturally kind of feel like a happiness that is sought for myself alone is no longer attractive. And I want to be honest. I struggle a lot. If you knew me on a day-to-day basis, you'd think that guy's a happy guy. I am. I have like 10 guitars looking at me. How can you not be happy? They're all around the room. I love my wife after 24 years. I think my kids are dazzling, but I struggle, man. And I go off on these tangents like, is it going to always be like this? Am I going to be, there's long times with my wife where I'm doing everything I always do to take care of her. She's just not giving me much love back. It's just, we're in a marriage and it's business. And, what I've learned about that through Alcoholics Anonymous saving my life is sometimes the next indicated thing to do is nothing. And that's really hard sometimes. And sometimes I'll wait a day, lie in a bed thinking, man, is this what my life's going to look like? This flowing one way stuff, and then going to work and then helping her get dressed and undressed. And it's not feeling like I'm even the hero she used to think. I'm not the love of her life. And then she'll just have a day of effusive love for me. Now, I did set this up on my own. I married a British woman. You have to go to France for the romance. I got British where it's like, hey, babe, I'm here next to you. That's how I love you effusively. But again, I wouldn't know any of this. I'd have copped out, burned out, run out if I didn't have this constant reminder from this literature, this constant reminder from people like you, this constant reminder, like there's friends on here. I just want to start talking to you, Jim. It's so good to see you, man. It's so good to see you. And like this love I have. And that brings me to what I hope I'll close with here. But I probably won't. There's this thing where he said, until I could offer myself to God's, I could not avail myself of God's love until I was able to offer it back to him by loving others as he would have loved me. He would love me. And, if you stay around here long enough and you put yourself out there long enough, you're going to say things that you don't know why you said them. And I'm not trying to speak for the group. It's just my experience. Okay. So what's happened to me is I was helping this guy who tried to kill himself years ago. Not a very strong attempt, but he was definitely clinically depressed, and he had been a very happy man, and we had a lot of good times together. He wasn't in AA, we were just friends, but a really interesting character, an actor, and we were very close. And I moved in with him when I could be there when he was in the depression, but I had to go away, and his family came. And he was in a room saying, I have to go have dinner with my brothers and my parents. And he said, I just feel like I have nothing to offer. I'm sitting in here in the dark. I don't want to see them. And I said, do you love them? And he said, yeah, I love them. And I said, well, why don't you don't have to do anything. They're not expecting you to be the entertainment. They're expecting you to show up. They're there because they're worried about you. If you just sit and eat dinner, you'll be fine. And then this is where this thing happens that I think is higher power happening. Higher power, the same energy that's giving me breath from these trees causes a little electric impulse in my brain that I didn't expect. And I said to him, why don't you just look at your brother and send love to him in your mind? Just send love to him. And why don't you look at your father, who at that time was in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and just give him love. You love him. So he called me back after dinner. I don't know why I said that. I don't know where that came from. He called me back after dinner and he said, that was amazing. He said, you know what I found out about giving love around the table? And I said, what? And he goes, you never run out. I didn't know that. I'd never even tried what I told him to try. But a couple of years later, Phoebe, my daughter, who was born the day I got sober, was flunking out of college. I think she was majoring in marijuana. I think that's what she was majoring in. And she wasn't doing really well there. And I went up there to spend some time with her. I think it was our birthday. And she was terrible. She wasn't eating anything and drinking, quadruple lattes. And we went to a movie and she was on her phone the whole time. And she's on the way back to her apartment. I said, I'm kind of worried about you. You're not eating right. We were in that movie. You weren't even paying. And she just starts screaming at me. And she's done this before. And so I rolled down all the windows on my car. And she's like, what are you doing? And I go, well, I just feel like there's so much energy coming out of you. I would not want to just keep it to myself. So I'm going to let everybody in San Luis Obispo get a flavor for what I get to have. And she got really upset, right? And shut up. It was like growling dog at me. And she got out of the car and she slammed the door and she went into her apartment. And I felt terrible. I felt like a failure. I felt like a failure as a dad. I was worried about her. She was super smart. She wasn't doing well in school. She was going down the wrong path. And I tried everything I could think of. And I felt sick to my stomach. And I felt that adrenaline in my arms when someone's like just coming at you. So I went into San Luis Obispo, great town. I parked my car and just started walking around. They have a great record store there called Boo Boo Records. It's just a cool town. And I'm walking around in this malaise. And I think, hey, that thing I told Owen to do, that worked really well for him. So I just looked at this couple walking in front of me. It was this balding guy, kind of heavy set, and this woman with long blonde hair, and they were holding hands. It was so cool. About 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And I just said, God, I want to give you all the love I got. I want you to have the most romantic evening you've ever had. I want to give this to you. I'm like wishing you love. And it felt good, and then I went into Boo Boo Records, and I'm a record and book fiend. And I'm watching people look at books, records with that obsessive, like, I am in another planet right now, leave me alone. And I felt spontaneous love for them. That's AA saving my life. I didn't feel spontaneous love for people. That's called a fit spiritual condition. I've never had it before, so I know what it feels like. And I started sending love around to the record store owner and looking at people. Then I sat in this cafe by myself in a college town. So everybody else is coupled up. And I'm sitting there thinking about my daughter. And I start looking around the restaurant. And I start giving love. Gave love to the waiter. Gave love to the couple in the corner. Gave love to the couple, the college couple that I was equally worried about as I was my daughter. I just started really getting into it, And I didn't run out, and I didn't feel sick when I got done, and I slept like a baby that night. And I don't think I could give God's love to other people if I didn't have a quiet place inside me that I didn't make, by the way. I just found it through meditation and work, but meditation. And I had this feeling, over and over again, that I was going to be okay, that she was going to be okay, that things were going to be okay. And I've read a lot of spiritual books that say they're not going to be okay. They already are. And I have to remember sitting here that those words were written for me, to me. Right now, Rory's on his way. I don't know what's going to happen to that kid right now. But things already are okay. I know that. And part of the reason I can get back in touch with that is by just talking to you, saying what I believe out loud, sharing the experience of the lakes and the rivers and the trees, an intimate personal experience with people I know are thirsty for love, for God's love, are thirsty for whatever you call your higher power, that just want peace, that know what we're doing here. We're out there helping people. People don't get it. I'm going to tell you a couple more stories because Sam just told me this was a longer meeting than I thought. When I got up to the Seattle area, I had a hard time plugging in. I was traveling for work. I was traveling for AA. I was very concerned that my disabled wife and my 2 teenage kids that were still living with me were not doing well there. I built a little cabin and started meditating out there, but I wasn't connecting to AA. And I went to speak at a conference, and I can never remember. It was someplace in Colorado. And the guy who was my host was this giant cowboy. He was about 60 years old. He's about 6'5". He's bald headed, cowboy hat, broad shoulder. And he said in the morning, he came to my door on Sunday morning, and I'm supposed to go to some speaker breakfast. Right? And he goes, hey, we're not going to the speaker breakfast. And I go, okay. He's my host, so I assume it's legit. And we get in the car and he goes, I just want to take you somewhere else right now. And he took me to this old craftsman style house in this town in Colorado. And it was a Salvation Army, but it was an old craftsman style house. And we went in there and there was an old Vietnam vet tattooed up, smoking a cigarette, cooking eggs. And he's the house guy. He's totally immersed in AA. He runs the house. So we're eating this great breakfast he's making. And he says, I just thought you might be better off talking to these kids about the book. So this kid hears this, comes across the room and goes, hey, what's this mean on page 62? So I look down and we read it together and I tell him my experience and I ask him his experience and he tells me where he is, how nervous he is, and he's coming out of his own skin, and we do all this. And then another kid's kind of skeptical comes over and goes, well, I was thinking, and he opened his book. By the end of it, we talked for a couple hours about all these different pages of the big book, different steps. And I walked out of there thinking, this is what I'm not doing in Seattle. I'm waiting for the meetings to love me. I'm not loving them. No one wanted to talk to the guy with 20 years from California. They rushed to the newcomer until I met some really special people at the Washington Athletic Club that I did connect with my people just before I had to move back. So I started going to the jails and the prisons. And one of the things that had happened when we moved up there is that my house was broken into. So my kids don't want to move there. I'm worried I bought a house that was a little too rural. It was in a town called Gig Harbor. And before I could get up there with the same Airstream I just came home in, my son and I camped and surfed our way up. The first campsite I stop at, I hear it's been broken in, that my wife calls it, and my wife's British, we've been burgled. I thought that was so funny. We've been burgled. And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, well, we came in and the back door is flat on the kitchen and everything's gone. And we hadn't moved our stuff in. I had just flown up there for months and months and put in a new TV and new Xbox and a new computer and beds in the rooms, stuff we weren't going to move. And she said, everything's gone. I go, well, there wasn't that much stuff. She goes, no, everything. The speakers out of the ceiling, the kitchen sink, the bathroom sinks. And this house was made for that TV show, Extreme Home Makeover. And they took all the valuable appliances that were put there by Extreme Home Makeover, the Sonos sound system, everything was gone. And my daughter in the background was screaming. She was 12 years old and she was screaming over and over, I hate it here. And I just moved her. And I couldn't make that trailer go fast enough to get up there. The neighbors converged. They put the door back. They called the police. I called every day. My sister-in-law flew out from the UK, helped. I called, I had to get up this trailer up the coast. It wasn't going to happen in a night. And so we were keeping in touch. And I've had this experience at this Colorado thing. And I'm going to the jails and the prisons. And about a year into it, I get a letter from the Kitsap County Corrections Department. And I thought, oh crap, they actually did a background check this time. I'm not going to get a go. Like they finally figured out you're not allowed to go in and then come out. We found out about your past here, Mr. Mitchell. So I open it and I can't, I'm afraid. And it says, dear Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, we caught the suspect in your burglary. His name is, and I put my hand over the paper. And I said to my wife, if I know this guy's name, I can't go back in there and do 12-step work. And it's the only thing that's making me go right now. So she read it and she called the police. And this guy had bragged while busted on a crystal meth dealing charge that he and some of his friends had ripped off the Extreme Home Makeover house. And I went into that jail for a year. I did 4 meetings every time I went in there, 4 45-minute meetings with practically every prisoner in the room, in the place. It was rare when somebody passed on the meetings because it was time out of their cell. So I know that I 12-stepped this guy. And I called my sponsor. I told him what was happening. I go, I got to go to this jail. I think the guy's there. And he goes, Matthew, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to stop praying for spiritual growth. He said, just take it easy, man. Just chill a while. Kiss your wife. Go play in the backyard. But you know what? I did think about it. That guy scared the crap out of my children for almost a year because they didn't know if they were safe there. He took stuff that didn't mean anything to us, but he took away our dignity and our sense of security pretty violently. I still don't know what he looks like. I went to his sentencing because Bill said go to his sentencing, and he didn't show up, and he took 5 years. But while I was in that jail, so Sophie stays and Rory, they acclimate. They do okay. They don't do great. It hurt Rory to move. Sophie was a little better, but she starts bringing this little girl home, 12-year-old girl. And by the time she's 13, my wife is going to bed every night telling me we have to adopt this girl, Abby. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, no, we have to adopt this girl. And I said, you can't just take a kid. And she said, bad people are raising her. And I said, honestly, to be honest with all of you, I had Sophie, who was a really good kid. I had Rory and Phoebe. All of them were getting close to the goalposts. And in all honesty, they weren't pregnant and they weren't addicted to anything. I felt like I was really killing it as a parent. And I didn't want to adopt somebody that had been raised by wolves. That was my material fear. And then one night we were going to bed and Pip says, you know, you sure like to talk about your principles, but Abby's still going to sleep over there. She took her big lawn dart and threw it at my AA ego balloon and it popped. I was like, holy crap, what do I do now? So I told her in the morning, I said, I'm worried Abby's going to get pregnant or addicted to drugs and we're going to have this mess on our hands. And we started late. I'm getting into my 50s. I'm up in my office that night and Abby comes in because she's over at the house all the time. And she says, if you let me call you dad, I will not get pregnant. And I said, someone's been talking out of class to you. And you know what's sad about this story is I went to court and it was so easy to get her. Nobody cared. So I raised 4 kids to adulthood. And one day I'm in the Kitsap County Jail. I also went to the women's prison, but I was in the Kitsap County Jail. And you know, if anybody has done prison work and jail work, there's mentally ill people in there. And we were reading the 12-step in a conference room. And this guy goes, what do you do to practice these principles in all your affairs? And I said, well, I'm here. And he goes, no, this is AA, man. What do you do to practice it in all your affairs? And I said, well, you know, I was grappling at something. He goes, you're just like everybody. You're just a phony. And I said, well, I did do something I didn't want to do based on the principles of AA. I adopted a girl. I adopted Abby. And the guy on the other side of the table slowly puts his head down on the table. And I said, is something wrong? And he goes, are you Matthew Mitchell? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm in here for beating up Abby's mom. I know you. I don't think that much of you because Abby's mom talked about what a monster I was. He said, but if a guy like you can get sober, I can probably get sober. Nothing is separate. This is the sky and the rain and the earth. I did not go in there and help that guy. I walked in there and said my piece, and that guy was connected. He did get out. He went to 2 meetings and he OD'd and died. Abby's mom went to prison while we were her guardian. And I just had lunch with Abby when I went up to Washington. She is beautiful. She was challenging, but not in the way I thought she would be. I was invited to grow. And I can tell you honestly, I have not accepted all of the invitations I have had. Almost every relationship I'm in continually is an invitation to grow. My loving relationship with my wife, my relationship with my friends at work, it's continually, are you going to grow? And I will say, sometimes I decline those invitations and I lose. I don't get whatever would have been there if I grew, or I don't have those relationships last. You know, it's funny, in AA, they talk a lot about selfishness and self-centeredness. And I related to that right away. When they said the boundage of self, I went, that's me, man. I get it. I have to walk into a room. If I see you and I don't know you, I categorize you and I label you and I make you less threatening. If I have a resentment against you, I one-dimensionalize you. If I feel threatened by you, I turn you into a flat cardboard person. You don't have feelings and a history and philosophy and fears. You're that dick. That's what I do to people, right? And so when I saw that selfishness and self-centeredness, I understood it. The bondage of self, I get it. And the still small voice and the working with others and the telling the truth on the fifth step and the paying the amends back, those things calm down. Like Bill says in the last part of this, I am no longer racing compulsively. But what I realized about selfishness over the years is people like me who are selfish and maybe like you, think they're getting away with something. You know, if I don't answer my office door when my son's knocking on the door, I'm getting me time. If I don't agree to go to the thing my wife wants to go to, and instead I make her go to the thing I want to go to, I win. And then over time, what I've realized, because AA saves my life on a continuous basis, is the only person that loses when I'm selfish is me. I missed an opportunity to sit and talk to my son when I work from my house. My wife was trying to show me something about the world that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't have seen, fallen in love with her and followed her around and adored her. That's happened so many times. One time when we were newly married, she goes, let's go see madrigal singers at UCLA. And I thought, God, I'd rather shove nails in my eyes than do that. But I said, okay, because we're newly and madly in love, right? And we went to see madrigal singers. Now, I used to do that at the Renaissance Fair when I was in high school. And I walked in there and these amazing madrigal singers start singing. And I fell more in love with my wife. I thought, God, this is why you get married. So you'll get pulled into these things. It was beautiful. So I'm going to finish with this. And I may have talked about this in May when this was a men's stag, right? Back in, because I looked at the old flyer and it was a men's meeting. So I know at least a few of you haven't heard about this. My friend Jim has, but when I moved to Washington and I built that cabin out and back, I had a hard time. It wasn't just connecting with AA. I was mortified that I'd made a selfish decision. I really just took the job because I had kids going into college. It was a pretty profound promotion. Plus, you guys have no federal or state income tax. So it was a big raise. And I need to get these kids through college. But it was really hard on my family. I was afraid my wife wasn't going to make any friends. I was really scared that I'd made a bad decision. So when I woke up in the morning, I felt like I had an elephant on my chest every day. And I will tell you, walking out to that cabin in the back and doing 30 minutes of meditation, I'd be out there for an hour. I'd light the wood stove. There was no electricity. It was 5 acres away from my house. And I was scared of animals in Washington. Those were some not very faithful runs out to the backyard at 5 in the morning when it was pitch black. But I go in there and I'd meditate, and 99% of the time I went back into the house feeling good. But my overall feeling was a bit of a malaise, and I didn't want to cop to it because I felt like I drug everybody to Washington. I also had a very scrutinized position. I led a lot of people, so I couldn't really say to anybody, can we just pause for a minute? I'm depressed. There just wasn't a spot. And I'm talking to Bill about it, my sponsor, and I'm trying to do this jail work. But I could tell what was happening was I was clogging up. I was gathering garbage inside of me. I was having negativity, which exponentially multiplies itself, just like positivity does, by the way. And I got this email around Father's Day, and I just had a talk with my wife, and she said, you got to stop traveling so much. The girls are about to graduate. You're going to AA meetings and you're traveling for work. Can you please chill out? And I really heard her this time. She'd said this before, but I called and canceled a bunch of stuff. I called my regional director and said, I'm not doing these 2 routes for a few months. I need to concentrate on home. And I got this email on Father's Day, and it was from this guy I met years ago at an AA convention in Florida. I actually gave him a book on Hinduism. And he said, hey, have you ever gotten to India? And I said, no. And he said, do you want to go? I'm taking an ego smashing tour of India. And I read it, and he had his itinerary. He was trying to get people to go. It was, you go to Delhi and you're kind of a spiritual tourist for a couple of days. Then you go help feed the hungry at a Sikh temple. Then you go to Varanasi, a city I have always wanted to see. And you've seen it in movies about India. It's the oldest city in the world, older than Athens, continuously running. And that's the holiest city in India. And there we were going to go and work in an orphanage. And then the last stop was in Calcutta. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up because Mother Teresa's hospice is in Calcutta. It's been running continuously since the late 40s. And I really wanted to go, but I knew I couldn't because I just told my wife I wouldn't go traveling. And it was 3 weeks in India. So I said, hey, check this out. Remember that John guy in Florida? Well, you know, it turns out he went and lived in India. And now he does these tours. And maybe in 5 years, when everybody's out of college and we're a little sick of each other, maybe I can go do this for 3 weeks. And she said, well, let me see. And I went and took a shower. And I'm an AA guy. I take a shower. And then while I shave, I get calls. I have AA sponsees call in. So I'm in the bathroom for quite a while, maybe an hour. And I come out, and on my pillow is a printout with my ticket to India. Because my wife is disabled and on disability from British Airways. And it was a few months off. It was in November. And I said, what are you doing, babe? And this is 3 weeks. And she said, how could I stop you? I've had a map of India on my wall since I was 17. She knows. So there, I surrendered. I surrendered to the web of connection. I tried not to be selfish. I tried to love people with God's love. I wanted to go to India in the worst way, but I said, I know I can't, maybe someday. And then I got permission out of the blue. And I prepared, and I was carrying a heavy load. I was carrying some darkness in me, honestly. And I went to India, and it was freaking amazing. It's chaotic. It's noisy and smelly. It's just like my brain. And I go in there, and I'm immediately in love with it. We stayed in the Buddhist temple. I'm still in touch with the monks that put me up there. We fed 2,000 people at a Sikh temple. Most profound thing I'd ever seen. We moved on to Varanasi, and the orphanage was on a field day. So we worked with mentally ill people. There was a nun from the Sisters of Mercy, which I recognized as Mother Teresa's group. And I said, hey, we're going to Calcutta. I'd like to work at the hospice. And she said, Kaligat, talk to Sister Rebecca. Tell her Sister Michelle sent you. Out of my control, surrender totally. We go to there. For very personal reasons that I will not share with you, I wanted to work with the dying. It's extremely personal. I held both my parents while they died. I'm getting older. I needed to do this. And as we're getting closer, the other people who are with us, there's 3 other people go, hey, we're not down for working with the dying. You know, we'd like to work with little kids, so I have to love like God's love. And what I heard about in India, or what I learned in India, is when in India, let India, because your plans will change. The train won't go where it's supposed to. I don't know how that happens. They're on tracks. You know, things won't look like they're supposed to, but they all work out. So I get to Calcutta and I go, look, you know, we don't have to do this Kaligat thing, but we go to the thing at Mother Teresa's house where her body is and where the nuns are, and you sign up and you go through some training. And I just said, hey, is Sister Rebecca here? And I found her and said, Sister Michelle said, you know, I could go work at Kaligat if you would get. She goes, yeah, sure. And I said, but my friends don't want to go. She said, that's okay. So things are working out. So I get on the bus, 5 o'clock in the morning. First, you go have breakfast, which is a banana, a piece of white bread, and chai tea. And I'll tell you what, tasted freaking amazing. It was amazing. It's just the love in that place. Then you meet all these people from Spain and Ireland and Portugal and Germany that are all coming over to help at Mother Teresa's different places. Amazing. So I'm on the bus, and this girl from Spain, Margarita, says, hey, what's your name? I said, I'm Matthew. And she said, you're going to Kaligat. And I said, yeah. And she goes, do you know about Kaligat? And I said, well, I'm really excited to work with the patient. She goes, oh no, for the first 2 weeks, you do the laundry. And then for 2 weeks, you do the dishes. And then for 2 weeks, you can maybe work with the patients if you do a bunch of other stuff. Now, remember, I got a paralyzed wife at home. I got unhappy kids. I'm really carrying some stuff. And India's been taking it away little by little. And I'm looking at this girl and I said, okay, I guess I'm doing laundry. And she goes, no, you'll get to work with the patients. Like, I'm only here for 4 days. She'd been there for 6 months. Just bright light, this girl. So we go in, walk into Calicut. Calcutta is a dangerous place. Where her stuff is, where Mother Teresa's Calicut is dangerous. The god Kali, she's a destroyer. The goddess, it's crazy there. So we go in, and this little tiny nun is there, and somebody asks her something. My friend Margarita asks her something in Hindi, and she points to me and says something. So this servant guy is going to take me back to the laundry, and this little tiny nun, like 4'9", 10, like tiny, grabs the crook of my arm when I'm walking by, and she's got this beautiful Indian face, speaks perfect English, and she says, "What's your name?" And I said, "My name's Matthew." And she said, "Are you a physical therapist?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Are you a physical therapist today?" And I started laughing. I go, "Do you happen to need a physical therapist?" And she said, "Well, not just anybody. Have you ever worked with anyone that's paralyzed?" And I said, "Yes. Every day for the last 19 years, my wife's paralyzed." And she said, "I knew that. Can you help with the patients today?" And I just let go. I didn't get dependent on getting my way. I thought the experience, whatever it was going to be, was going to blow my mind. And I got to tell you that I had the privilege of holding people, men, that are poorer than anyone you've ever met. The clothes they had on their back, we gave them. And I got to hold them while they died, while they had their last breath. And I got to tell you what that experience is like. It's like that quiet place inside you times 10,000. It isn't dramatic. It isn't repulsive, or it wasn't for me. It was cleansing, and it pulled me so much into the present moment. The only place I've ever found God, that it was unavoidable. And the first time it happened, I looked around the room, and there's 50 guys in there dying. Some of them are going to die in 2 years. Some of them are going to die in 2 nights. And they're all looking at this, and we're holding this guy, and we're petting him, and we're praying with him. And when he dies, we clean him, and we dress him in silk clothes, and we wrap him up for cremation in Calcutta. And I thought, while this was happening, I'm noticing all these people, and I thought, this isn't scary for them. Look what they're seeing, this outpouring of love for this man. And the nun, the little tiny nun, I still don't remember what her name was. Although I'll tell you, she did a nun thing to me, because I was raised by the witches of God. I went to Catholic school, and I had a chai tea, and I put it on this table. And the nun was talking to me, and she kept looking at my tea and talking to me and looking at my tea. And she had that real tight smile that nuns get. And I didn't know what it was about. And she walked away, and I lifted up my tea, and it was on the plaque that said, "This is Mother Teresa's original desk from 1945. And I had my tea on it, right? But then I thought, man, it was like a dance I'd known my whole life. I just knew what to do. And I told Pip said the other day, "What would you do if I died?" And I said, "I'd go to India. I'd definitely go live there for 6 months of the year." I don't think I've been as happy as I've been in years. And when I got home, and one thing about being married to someone with brain damage is they don't pick you up at the airport. They just forget. And so I've learned over time, don't ask. So I got home, 25 hours of flying. I'm exhausted. I get in this Uber. I get my stuff. I drag my stuff out of the car. And my wife comes out on the porch, and my wife's British. She's not effusive. She's not super emotional. And I walk up on the stairs, and she says, "Oh my God, you are younger than when you left." AA saves my life. And I agree 100% with Bill, except that the dependence has to find a place. And that place is you can depend on the quiet space inside you. It's there. It doesn't even really belong to you. It belongs to the greater self. Your ego has nothing to do with it. That's my experience. Thanks so much for inviting me, Sam. I feel like I've been all over the map, but it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Oh man, thank you so much, Matthew. Holy shit, man. Every time you share it just breaks my heart wide open. Like I just love you.
I love you too, Sam.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just in the kingdom of God when I look on this project has gotten really cool. We opened it up just for fun. And all these people kept coming on that I just, I look at them every week now and I'm like, God, man, this is like, just fills my heart up. So the way we do this is now is the person who moderates picks on a few people to share. And so can you see the people on there, Matthew? Are you cool with that?
I do. Can I pick on somebody? You can raise your hands if you want, but I want to start with my friend Jim Phelps up in the top.
Up in the hood of Seattle. What's up, Jimmy?
Hey, guys. Matthew, I will second Sam. You are the coolest guy in AA. And,
it's a bad thing.
And I mean that genuinely because, your heart is a witness to God and that's Alcoholics Anonymous, that I'm able to hear and connect my energy in that space that we share. And I think I read it best once where, it was defined that my body is really just a vessel to transport my soul to connect with other people. And when I recognize that, what you're talking about, there's no dependencies, there's no demands, there's no expectations, there's just God's love. And if I am, he's the father, I'm the child, and if I'm really in that space, the manifestation of him, what else is there? There isn't resentment, there isn't attachments, disappointments, and judgments, and self-condemnation. There's just love. And, that is, I can't find it in no matter how much money I make, the perfect ideal relationship or romance, as Bill talks about. When I was asked to lead this the first time way back when, it was a men's group like yourself, and I got to share how dependent I was and what an emotional mess I was, and it really set me on a quest of work. And I really, was fortunate. I had a guy that was homeless, who came out of a tent, who, I could look in the mirror and see myself, and it was God. Who's to say that wasn't Jesus or whatever, that just got to show up and for me to love unconditionally, because I know what that depth of despair and hopelessness is like. And to actually get to see somebody that was human. And the point of the matter was it started me on this new trajectory and this new experience, new chapter, to where I realized that, the life that I was driven towards wasn't serving me. The life where I'm fulfilled, God, if I could get over to India and wash somebody's feet and, be in the presence of God and a purpose of serving and other people, man, I'll tell you, it's, I don't think like that when I'm Jim in charge and control, right? I got a plan, I've got an ego, and I need people to follow my controls. And you've been such an idyllic, I know people don't want to be idolized, but you really are such an example of what's possible in Alcoholics Anonymous if we do the work and we speak how we feel in our truth, and we're in touch with these emotions. And, you really touched me today, and I love you, and I'm going to get down to California to see you.
And you got to smudge my office.
I will.
Yeah. I love you, Jim, so much.
Good to see you. Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
Hey, so I could just, pick people, but if you raise your hand in the participant thing, then I know you want to share, because I could randomly do this. I do either way. I think there's a raise your hand button, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So
I'll give you
I'll
guys
do that part too. You can just pick whoever, if you have one more person or somebody you just like to hear from real quick, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah, I'm just curious about Sarah B, because you're actually right in front of me.
What's up, Sarah B?
My cat says hello too, but thank you so much for speaking. This is actually a friend invited me to this, and this was just blew me away. And I heard your story, and it was absolutely touched my heart, touched my soul. To hear everything and to hear the truth, just like your authentic self and helping and serving others. And I think just what a beautiful message. So I appreciate it, and I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah. Thank you. I do have one other person. I don't see any hands up yet, but Lynn hasn't answered. So Lynn, I'm going to call on you.
Okay, great. Lynn, alcoholic.
Hey, Lynn.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. I'm just really glad I came tonight. I'm trying not to be a smart aleck. I was going to say,
don't go against your nature.
You look strikingly young, and it was good that you weren't emotional. But but no, there was, I didn't raise my hand initially because most of what I was thinking was that I just want to regurgitate back so many of the things you said that just struck me. And I love that you talked about the happiness that is sought for oneself alone. And I couldn't write down the whole quote, but it's interesting because I was actually going to do a quote on no man is an island.
Oh, wow.
But and the talk about every single spiritual book or thing was written for you, and that everything, I can't see my own writing, but all of it is for you. All of it is for me. That really struck me. And then the humanness of I see it, I'm in it, and then I'm back to worrying, about my son or about my wife, and then I'm here again. Then I'm right here now, and then I'm back to worrying. I mean, that's the dance we do. I wrote down so many things, but that everything was attached. That we're all connected. We're all attached. I love that description. And I really like happiness for myself alone is no longer attractive. I love that. It's just, anyway. And then the sending love out to the guy to his brothers. And it made me think that I want to start practicing that I never run out when I'm sending love out. Anyway, and everything already is okay. So I never get tired of hearing you tell your stories, even though a lot of them I've heard, because I'm right there with you each time, and it just gives me a lot of desire to continue in my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous, and to get to be in that part of being of service, but also being in that 11th step and being in that seeking, that continuous seeking. And it's just so hopeful and so real and authentic, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Thank you. Sam, I don't see any hands, so can I just keep going?
Yeah, man. Yeah, however you want to do it, buddy. Go with it.
I'm going to turn the page for people I'm not staring at the whole time. How about Chris S? Yep.
What's up, Chris?
Black t-shirt. Cool posters on the wall, Chris.
See if I can figure out how to unmute myself. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. I heard you the first time when you shared it as a men's group, and it's just a lot of this stuff. Man, I think that the thing that really struck me about, just what you said about the quiet inner life as and just how easy it is to get away from that. And then, but then also how easy it is to come back to it. And you know, that it's sort of, it's just like so much of this stuff. Like it's like, I can just go off and just be all caught up in all my own stuff. And then so much, to me, the more that process happens of just seeing that happen, of just, and then veering off and, you know, into all the stuff that I'm just, you know, thinking about, and then coming back to it. I think that over time, as the more I have that experience, the more it sort of strengthens my faith in, you know, the reality of what that is that I'm tapping into when I'm having those experiences in that quiet place. So, you know, I just, I don't know that I have much else to say other than just that I really appreciate everything you shared. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Matthew, you know, that's a sometimes we don't get a lot of hands up because it's a pretty tough act to follow and everybody's just kind of zoned in, you know. But one of the things that I was going to ask you to speak to is, you know, our culture seems to put so much, it's almost like a consumeristic, that's not really a word, but we're more consumers of like romantic love in a lot of ways, you know, and you probably know where I'm going with this, but there's so much of it's like, you know, what am I getting out of this deal? You know, like, what am I getting out of this relationship? And one of the most beautiful things about this letter to me is all about unconditional love. And you went through one of the most, not unique, but one of the most serious stories of falling in love with Pip and having that whole situation, and then her having a stroke. And then, I mean, you guys were married, what, like 5 years?
5 years, yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like when that first happened and kind of then how you grew into the transition of your relationship into what it is now a little bit?
Yeah, what it is now would be like trying to put my finger on Mercury because it keeps moving around, man. But for those of you who know me, I fell in love with my wife at first sight. I met her at a bus stop. We were engaged 2 weeks later. We've been together for 25 years. I have not regretted a single time walking down the aisle with my wife. I often think she'll wake up screaming and try to run from the house. That's why I'm not really into stem cell research, because she might learn to outrun me if that stuff works out. But in all seriousness, we had a 1-year-old, or almost 2. Sophie was, no, she was 1, and Rory was 5, and Phoebe was 8 or 9, when Philippa became paralyzed completely on her left side and brain damage. And I'll tell you the thing about, if any of you have had the situation where you're in love with someone who has brain damage, is it will teach you what powerlessness is. Because the thing about a physical disability is it's not, you just accommodate. You know, if you've ever had a child, if that child lost the arm, you don't love them less, you just help them with stuff that needs 2 arms. So that part has not been hard for me, helping my wife get dressed. And what I sometimes feel really wincy when I say I'm a caregiver, because she sort of is the center of everything. She runs the soul of things, and that's never changed. But she forgets a lot. She's undependable. You try to raise 4 children, have a professional job, travel with someone who you can't depend on. That's hard. That's the hard part. But I'll tell you something that happened the night Philippa was in the hospital for the first time. I found her just on the floor, and we were in a hospital, and I called my sponsor at like 3:30, 4 in the morning. I don't remember. I was awake. I was wired. I was scared. They just told me they weren't going to be able to help her. They tried a surgery on her brain and it failed. And they found the tear in her carotid. And I called my sponsor, Bill, who you all had as a speaker a few weeks ago. And Bill said, hey, I want you to hang up on me and call Jay. Now, I don't know Jay that well at this time, right? This was 20 years ago almost. And I don't want to call Jay. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. And he said, just trust me. First of all, he was very loving and kind and said, there are big deals in AA and you're having one of them right now. He was stunned. He loves my wife. So he made me get off the phone and call Jay, which I did not want to do. And I called Jay, and Jay's equally kind. and says, I want you to talk to my wife, Adele. And I'm like, I didn't want to call this guy. I really don't want to talk to his wife. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. My wife's in ICU. I haven't changed my clothes for 24 hours. I'm standing outside of a hospital. It's very impersonal. And I'm talking to now 2 people I don't want to talk to. And I called for help to my sponsor. And he says, no, trust me, you want to talk to Adele. And Adele gets on the phone and she says, I have had 4 strokes. Let me tell you what your wife's feeling. And that's what I love about AA is there are a lot of opinions, but people tend to guide you to experience. And this woman had experience. And she told me how afraid my wife was, how out of control she felt, how she couldn't trust herself. Like really important information. I hadn't been thinking about that. I was still in the holy shit, what just happened phase, you know. And then Jay takes the phone back and says, hey, brother, you've always wanted to be the world's greatest lover. Now's your chance. He hit me right in my solar plexus. I knew exactly what to do when I walked into that room. Adore her. So it's just been butterflies and moonbeams since then. Actually, what happened was, like anybody, like at one point at 10 years of marriage, so I said to my sponsor, I go, it's, Pip's brain damage. I'm just not married to the girl I was 10 years ago. And he said, welcome to the club, my friend. And he said, she's not married to the same guy. But what I can say about, this romantic love, the Dalai Lama said it better than anybody. I like things that are succinct. He said, love is absolute acceptance. It actually is in the big book. When Dr. Paul says, when I focused on Max's qualities, they grew. When I focused on her character defects, they grew. And when I found out what limited things I know about women, and I've only raised 3 daughters, and if I had to date again today, I would choose not to. Having raised 3 daughters, you guys are pretty scary. But with my wife, when she feels loved and supported and accepted, she is a very powerful person. She has a confidence and a laugh that's disarming. She says things to me I would never think of on my own. And, a long time ago, this guy, I don't know if anybody remembers this guy, Leo Biscaglia. He was the kind of first love guru. But I heard an interview with him when I was driving up into a canyon with my girlfriend in college. This is the 80s. And they said, how do you work on your marriage? And he says, I don't work on my marriage. He said, it's funny. When kids are growing up, you kind of expect them to grow and change. You don't wake up every day going, oh, I know what Bobby's going to do today. You treat them like they're new all the time. Because they are. And so is my wife. So the only thing I do is remember that and treat her like she's new and don't think I know what she's going to say or what she's going to do or that, oh, this again. And my experience with loving Philippa Mitchell, which has been a long, interesting path, is accepting her, loving her exactly like she is, because that's the only way she's going to feel relaxed and comfortable enough to shine on me. And also, in all truth, telling her when I'm not getting what I need. I have to do that sometimes. I have to sit down and say, babe, I love you. I love what we have together, but could you just tell me that you believe in me, that you respect me, that you love me? And she'll say, I show you that by my actions. I go, yeah, I need that right now. And I'll tell you, I want to be totally honest. That works 43% of the time. Now, she may do it 70% of the time, but it actually feels good 43% of the time. Patience and tolerance, humility and willingness. Let the person you're in love with surprise you, and they will. Take away the stage and the lights and the space and the acceptance and the room for them to do that, and they won't. And, we've been, for the first time in my life, I haven't traveled for 7 months. We're in a house we just bought, we love, no kids. This was the test. Do we actually like each other? And I'm proud to say we do. I'm planting roses. I don't like planting roses. But I never would have planted roses if I hadn't met Pip. And after they're planted, they're pretty cool. And we sit out there and have coffee. You know, I'm just trying to ease into the life that I'm being invited to. The last thing I'll say about this, Sam, and it's probably more than you asked for, is, you know, I've talked a long time about the next indicated thing. I was told to do that by my sponsor when I asked, how do I know God's will for me? 25 years ago, I asked him that. And he said, just do the next indicated thing, right? Just do that. And somebody asked me once after a meeting, what else could you do but the next indicated thing? And my response was what we've always done, the next grandiose plan. And just like everything feeds everything, when I held my mother when she died of cancer, I learned that all she wanted me to be was sitting by her bed. She didn't want the mariachi band I wanted to hire. She didn't want the cool food from the restaurant she loved. She didn't want dazzle. She wanted company. And so with Pip, I try to do the next thing she invites me to, you know, and if you give, my experience is if you give someone that kind of space, they'll invite you and then they'll come when you invite them. That's my experience.
That's beautiful, man. I love that Peter M, you know, Peter Marinelli always talks about living a life of invitation.
Yeah, look what happened to him.
Yeah. So there's a guy here that's a good friend of mine that hadn't been on here yet before, but he sponsored me a long time ago and had these men's meetings where we would read this essay, and I kind of carried it over, and then it turned into this, and he's on tonight for the first time, and I'd love to hear from him. Brant, you around, man?
Hey, Sam. Thanks. I'm not sure I have a lot to offer tonight. Matthew, I just thank God for people like you. I'm not built the way you're built. If I had to work with the people that you worked with over there in India, I would be useless. I'm just not built that way. And so thank God for people like you. And I know that you've given me a lot to think about tonight too. I've been sober a long time, and I've been and I generally almost all the time I'm in I have serenity and peace in my life, and but tonight you've given me a lot of things to think about, and you've shown me a lot of areas where I have refused the invitation. It's one of the things about this article, to build it. I think for me it changed everything. I was about 15 years sober, and I was empty like you, and and I didn't know what to do, and no one knew how to help me. And I found this article, and then I found a few people who had some knowledge and some insight, and it changed everything about me. It talks about being in a hell of a spot. Literally, I was in a hell of a spot. I couldn't drink, I couldn't kill myself, but I didn't know what to do. And I think we have to, I think in AA, we're not, most of us or all of us, I'd say, are very acquainted with suffering. And I think you have to suffer a lot to get to this point. And, to really see and understand that absolute dependence that he was talking about in this, when you can see that and really know that everything's, whenever I'm disturbed, no matter what it is, it's me. When you can start to see that, I read that and I look out and I see the things that I'm external things that I'm using to make myself feel better. And I got a little off track here. I'm sorry. I know we're running low on time. But what I wanted to talk about was, sorry, I'm just not, I'm not much of a speaker, and I've lost track of it. But Matthew, thank you so much for your share tonight and giving me such a lot of great things to think about. And Sam, thanks for having this. This is not the little thing that you led me to believe that it was. when I popped on, I was like, wow. And then it just kept growing and growing in the numbers. And of course, Sam, I'm going to say something good about Sam here. I've known him for, God, who knows how long. And I always love to see Sam after a period of time, because he's always grown so much, and he's always wanting to become a better person and to change. And Sam, it's great to see you continue to grow in this program. So thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, man. Much love. Well, let's, you have anything else you forgot to say that you want to add in, Matthew? We're about,
Can I read a poem to you about
Yeah.
God?
Yeah.
I found this the other day. I have a men's group that a meeting of people, and we were talking about the things that preoccupy us and how small they are. And this is a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke. It's a little long, so might consider it the prayer, but I like 2-3 minutes. It's called The Man Watching. It's one of my favorite poems. I can tell by the way the trees beat after so many dull days on my worried window panes that a storm is coming. And I hear the far off fields say things I can't bear without a friend. I can't love without a sister. The storm, the shifter of shapes, drives on across the woods and across time. And the world looks as if it had no age. The landscape, like a line in the psalm book, is seriousness and weight and eternity. What we choose to fight is so tiny. What fights with us is so great. If only we would let ourselves be dominated as things do by some immense storm, we would become strong too and not need names. When we win, it is with small things, and the triumph itself makes us small. What is extraordinary and eternal does not want to be bent by us. I mean, the angel who appeared to the wrestlers of the Old Testament. When the wrestler's sinews grew long like metal strings, he felt them under his fingers like chords of deep music. Whoever was beaten by this angel, who often simply declined the fight, went away proud and strengthened and great from that harsh hand that kneaded him as if to change his shape. Winning does not tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings.
That's beautiful, man. All right, well, let's close it down. We usually do it with we go to our kind of inner room and just everybody mutes themselves, and we just inwardly say the Lord's Prayer.
That's great. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks everyone so much for joining us. And I'm reading this book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is a great book. It's pretty simple, but it's really a cool book.
Who's it by?
And I'll send you the link to it. I don't remember what the author's name is. John Ortega does the intro to it. But one of the lines in it is, your life is the sum of what you give your attention to. It's like, boom. Anyway, beautiful life, man. Much love.
Thank you,
Good night,
Matthew.
everybody.
Much love, everybody. Thanks for coming
Thanks,
along.
buddy.
I'm not that
Great
great.
job, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Motions.
Hello, Tom.
You.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, you guys. Nice
Thank
to
you
see
so
everybody,
much.
Sarah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Matthew.
Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, you guys.